Hi, everyone. Thanks for joining us on our panel today. I'm Emily Teraoka. I'm a park ranger at Minidoka National Historic Site. And I'm really excited to be a part of this panel and to be speaking with these three lovely gentlemen from Okaeri, LA. And I'll give them a chance to introduce themselves, and then we'll talk about a little bit about what Okaeri is, and then we'll have a chance to have a conversation about LGBTQ identities within the Nikkei community. But yeah, Justin, if you would like to go first and introduce yourself.
Yeah, thanks, Emily. Hi, my name is Justin Kawaguchi. I am a senior at the University of Southern California, and I chair outreach for Okaeri. My pronouns are he, him, and his, and I'm currently here in Los Angeles, California. Thank you for having us.
Thanks, Justin. And Michael, if you would like to go next.
Sure. Thank you for having us. My name is Michael Matsuno. My pronouns are he, him, and his. And I'm a flutist. I just moved back to LA, finishing my doctoral work at UC San Diego. And I actually just joined Okaeri, so I'm very excited to be working with them.
Thank you, Michael. And then Eric, would you like to introduce yourself?
Hi, my name is Eric Arimoto, and I identify as he, him, his. I'm a fourth generation Japanese American, gay man, and a psychotherapist. Really happy to be here. Thank you, Emily.
Thank you. Yeah, thank you all for joining us. And if you would like to talk a little bit about Okaeri, and about your organization, that'd be great.
Yeah, of course. So for all those who don't know, so Okaeri LA or Okaeri Los Angeles is a Nikkei LGBTQ+ community. We were founded back in 2014 by Marsha Izumi as a way to bring together members of the Nikkei LGBTQ community. Our primary programming has been through in-person gatherings held biannually, so back in 2014, 2016, and then 2018, some photos on the screen right now of our past gatherings held at the Japanese American National Museum in Los Angeles. It's a place where people can come together, define a community, share stories, and kind of hear from one another, see what it means to be part of the community. We hold workshops, plenaries, wonderful events at those in-person gatherings. We're now pivoting because of COVID to react to be more virtual, so holding a number of wonderful panels. We had one with George Takei at JANM back in June with myself. We're having some wonderful virtual workshops. We're having some intergenerational support groups, as well as healing circles coming up in the future in the fall. Our mission is to create safe spaces, visibility, and transformation for Nikkei LGBTQ+ community members and their families through sharing stories, resources, advocacy, and just being a really supportive community for all the people around the world, but especially for those within the Japanese American communities. And so we really have loved having the opportunity. Some of the photos over there on the screen right now, but that's a kind of quick summary about Okaeri. We can answer some more questions later on, but that's a pretty fast but accurate representation of who we are. Thank you, Emily.
Yeah, thank you for that, Justin. I know it's really exciting because as I mentioned to you before when we were first planning for this panel, I hadn't heard of Okaeri until this week when we were making plans for this panel. And it was so exciting to me to hear about an LGBTQ organization within the Nikkei community, because I identify myself as pansexual and also on the asexual spectrum. And even though I had a very understanding family and that I felt comfortable with, and I have friends from college who are very open about their identities as people within the LGBTQ community, this was a first for me to hear about Japanese Americans, about fellow Japanese Americans who identify as such. And so I'm just really happy to hear, to speaking with you all, to hear your stories. And if you would like to talk a little bit, if we want to talk a little bit more about ourselves, I think, Eric, you identify as a gay man. And then if Michael and Justin, if you want to talk a little bit more about yourselves and about your experiences being LGBTQ within the Nikkei community.
Sure. Well, I'm also a cisgender gay man, and that's how I identify. Should I share a little bit about my background?
Yeah, please do.
Okay, sure. So I was actually born in Osaka, Japan, where I was then adopted at a few months old. So I was adopted interracially. So my father's Japanese American and his family's Japanese American, and my mother's family is white Jewish American. So it's this interesting position I'm in where I'm myself first generation, but my dad is second generation. I came out when I was about 15 as gay. I've been out ever since and happy about it. I guess we could talk more about that or more questions as they come up, but that's basically my background.
Sure. Thank you. And then Justin, if you would like to share as well.
Yeah, so I identify as a cisgender bisexual man. For some context for myself and kind of my journey, so I am 5th generation Japanese American, so I'm Gosei. I've been pretty involved with the J community since I was pretty young, going to like Buddhist day camp in the summers. I was involved with junior YBA when I was in high school. I've really been involved since then, but I found oftentimes that I was never, I think, able to really be my full self in both, I think, the LGBTQ plus or the Nikkei spaces. But I think Okaeri really has been that home for me. A fun story that I actually came out publicly to my family and everybody else through a program last month, which was the Georgia K program. So almost in the most public way possible, I came out to my friends and family where they read the newsletter from Janum saying, Justin's on this panel with Georgia K talking about being queer in the community. And so it was a really, I think, wonderful way for me myself to have the most impactful big way to do it. But I have been, I think, out for a while with my friends and family, but it was the most public way recently with that panel. But I've loved being a part of Okaeri. I think it really helped me become more comfortable with myself and talking about that side of my identity. So that's kind of my story.
That's so great. Yeah, this I can relate. So yeah, I hadn't really talked too much about it within the Nikkei community until today. So definitely can understand how that was like for you. But Eric, if you would like to talk about your experience, how did you join Okaeri? How did you find it?
Wow. I always tell people that I'm a reluctant activist, and I as an introvert and somebody who kind of left the community, I left the village when I was 18, and I thought I would never look back again. I would never be back. You know, I met Marsha Izumi, who is the founder of Okaeri, and she's sort of our fierce LGBTQ advocate, mom, fierce, you know? And she can light a fire, right? And she could also make you cry in a minute. So I met her at a training I was at when I was in school, and she brought her son, who identifies as transgender male, and I had no idea what was going to happen that day. But she sat down, and the words that came out of her mouth were the words that I wanted to hear from my mom, from my parents, where she understood the complexities of identity and the journey that her son was on, and that and she offered her son reparations, you know, because of the assumptions that she had about her child and all the projections and the misunderstandings and the erasure of that identity, right? And I just sat there and cried the whole session. And this was at a school training, right? And I just bawled my eyes out because it resonated so deeply in me. And that was my introduction, my reintroduction back into the Japanese American community, because I had been swimming with the sharks out there with the white folk for decades at that point. And it was very eye-opening, and I felt like it was okay for me to come home.
Mm-hmm. Oh, that's lovely. Thank you for sharing that.
Yes.
So yeah, I don't know if I don't know if I really have much of a coming out story. It was, for me, it was kind of interesting because my friend had talked about it, I think, during in relation to Pride Month and activities that you were seeing on like social media and such. And so she made a comment about it, about herself being bisexual. And then my mom was reading and she's like, "Oh, did you know this about Margaret?" And I said, yeah, sure. And then she's like, "Okay." And then, "Are you the same way?" And so I had never really I never felt afraid about how my parents might react to it. I knew that they would accept me. It's just I think it was just more of a situation that I didn't really want to. I thought it might change things. Like I thought it might about how my friends and family who I've known for so long, they might just try to in little ways to do things a little bit differently or say things in a certain way. And I just didn't really, I don't think I was really ready for that change. And so suddenly this was a very sudden situation for me. But like I said, my parents are really, really sweet about it. And so I knew that they would accept me right away. So I was lucky about that. But yeah, so I know, we've been talking a little bit about coming out experiences, but then as far as Okaeri, the organization, like, are there any specific issues that that you might be focusing on? I kind of looks like at this point it's mostly trying to just spread the word and try to get people to know about it.
Yeah, I mean, one thing that we are doing recently is trying to access more Japanese language speakers, knowing that for many people from Japan, I think finding the vocabulary to speak about LGBTQ plus terms and finding ways to find compassion through language is challenging when that's not knowledge that's available to everybody. And so doing translation work, finding ways to spread the word to those who speak Japanese, who might be either in America or in Japan, and being able to provide them with the vocabulary and how to address the conversation that kind of comes from a place of compassion has been one of our recent initiatives. We have a poster project working on with some translators. We're trying to increase our Japanese language outreach, having Japanese language support groups at Okaeri, the in-person gatherings. We always have Japanese language sessions and workshops for those who feel more comfortable discussing in language. And so that's one of our priority areas recently. Also, we're trying to increase our reach, because since we are doing virtual everything, trying to have people be able to access it from whether you're in LA or New York or Chicago or Texas or Washington, DC, wherever you are, being able to access Okaeri resources has been a blessing from having the virtual movement. So building our social media following, plug, you can follow us on Instagram at Okaeri_LA or on Facebook at Okaeri LA. We have both a Facebook page and Instagram. So definitely please connect with us over there. And so those are two of our things we've been working on. But Eric is also doing some wonderful work with our support groups. Eric, you want to talk about that?
Sure. Well, my pet project all along has been trying to rope back in and invite back in all of the 40 plus LGBTQ people out there who were like myself, felt like you couldn't, like Justin was saying, you can't be gay and Japanese American. And so you have to choose an identity in which you're going to thrive. And now we're contemplating that you don't have to choose, you can be both and be accepted and feel part of the community. So we're going to be starting to have some virtual meetings, multi-generational meetings. And if we get enough critical mass in different groups, we can break out at some point and focus on coming out or grandparents or transgender identity, or maybe closed groups for LGBTQ people, just to have a private conversation. One of the most amazing experiences I had as a result of being part of Okaeri was to actually sit down with a bunch of gay men who are Japanese American, over 40, and for all of us, it was the first time that we had sat down with more than another person. It was like 3 as a crowd for us, right? And I don't know how we had not crossed paths before, and it was really eye-opening. It was also kind of shameful, right? Because we should be here to support each other. We should be out and connected, right? And so there's some structural things in our community that block people from being with each other, right? And so I think Okaeri is a really important venue to create visibility and connect people.
That's wonderful. It's so great to hear. And Michael, will have so you haven't been with Okaeri long, have you? But are there any particular areas that you are involved in?
Right. Well, I just started.
Oh, okay, so really recent.
Yeah, I'm really hoping to be involved in their programs committee with Eric. I'm still sort of figuring out how I can be helpful and how I can use my resources and my expertise. A lot of what Eric just said, really resonates with me, especially because, yeah, I feel like visibility is somehow extremely. I just feel like we're still have a long way to go in a lot of ways. So,
sure.
Yeah, we'll see.
Yeah, because I think even in general, even outside the Nikkei community, I think perceptions have shifted over time, and there's a little bit more acceptance over the years. But at the same time, I feel like there's still sort of a stigma that we just don't talk about it, maybe, within the Nikkei community. And so it is kind of nice to have that community or have that kind of subset of community to come together and feel more comfortable and have that safe space to talk about things.
Yeah, and I think also, if I could add in something pretty quick, I think that one thing that really resonated with me when I was first attending Okaeri back in 2018 was somebody said the JA saying, like, the nail that sticks out gets hammered down.
Oh.
And I think that I have a very similar experience to you, where my parents are very accepting. I know that my friends and family are supportive of me. I think culturally it still seems like it's odd to be different, whether it's for sexuality, for all those other different things. I think that people still have this feeling of being different as being negative or being something you should be pushing down. And so one thing I loved about our Okaeri program was that I remember I went to a panel or a workshop where we learned about the history of social justice within the LGBTQ space as well as the JA space, and seeing how there's so much overlap between the two, and that activism can be truly both intergenerational, but also I think between different social movements. And so seeing that there is a community, like Eric said and like Michael said, other people who have similar experiences, and then finding your voice to do so has been really empowering for me, because the JA community has been such a big part of my life, and finding a space where I can be both parts of myself in the same location has been super special. But I agree with what you said completely.
Yeah, it's so true. In the Japanese American community, there's so much advocacy within the Japanese American community because based off of that incarceration history. And so it seems like it should be natural that we should also have a lot of advocacy on behalf of other groups, of other parts of our identities within the Nikkei community. So as LGBTQ. Yeah. And then, I don't know if there are any other stories you would like to share, or anything that comes to mind about your relationship with Okaeri, or about other people that you've met that really have an impact on you.
Well, Emily, if I can, I just want to back up a little bit. Michael asked a question. You asked how you can serve the group and participate, where you fit in. And because you have a very unique story, and I guarantee you there are people out there for whom that's going to resonate, right? And your demographic, and you came out early, so that's going to be a really great modeling for other younger people who are at that point of coming out and maybe don't have the supports that you had. So we're really happy to have you here.
Thanks. Oh, I'm so happy to be here, and I have to say too, like, I'm so new that actually, like, right now at this very second, I feel like I'm getting to know you, Eric and Justin, and like, yeah, I'm just actually kind of in the middle of processing all of this too myself. I didn't really get to like, I could share a little bit more about my background actually.
Sure.
I'd love to know more about Eric and Justin, but just like, one thing I've been thinking a lot about in preparation to be here today with you is like a recent experience I had where I brought my partner home to New Year's, and New Year's is a very special time for Japanese people, right? It's a very important holiday, and I think I probably had brought boys home before. I'm sure I have, but this was really special because this is the person I probably will spend the rest of my life with. My parents know him very well. And I introduced him as my boyfriend, which was significant. And, I didn't get a lot of questions, as pretty typical in the context of my family, right? They don't ask questions, but they really signaled in a way that really shocked me how open and welcoming they were. Now, this makes me think of some things that Eric had brought up about intergenerationality that I'm extremely interested in, because being adopted by parents later in life, they were in their mid-40s, I've always felt a little disjunct from my Japanese American family by age. There's quite a big distance in age between us. So, my Japanese family, most of them have passed on, and I'm kind of all that's left, except for my father. So, in that way, like, I think about how I never got to come out to most of them, how probably it wouldn't have been met with the same attitudes as it was with the particular family that I was with. But, I think that this idea of intergenerationality in the Japanese American community seems, I don't know, it really seems to be highlighting something really important for me in my experience of being Japanese American, like basically never seeing a Japanese American my age until like this moment, literally, like it's always been elders. And so this is really important in a lot of ways, this intersectionality of like both age and gender and sexuality. So.
Sure.
It's too bad that we don't have our actual physical meeting, because it's really something to behold. And you walk into this big hall and it's filled with your aunties and your uncles and your grandparents and people that you've seen in your community your entire life. And you just never imagine them coming to an LGBTQ oriented event to support and to learn. So, but we'll have it virtually.
And I think one thing that Eric talked about that I really resonate with, like, I think the feeling of community when you come to these gatherings. Kind of my story with Okaeri is that I met Marcia at a JCL convention back in Salt Lake City last summer. And I was talking to her because my birthday happened to be the same birthday as her son, Aiden, which was just a happy coincidence. We connected over that shared commonality. And then she said, oh, you should come to learn more about Okaeri in LA because you're at USC. And so I attended our first meeting back in September as a note taker, like only as a note taker. I wasn't going to participate, just going to be typing up notes in the back corner the entire time. But people didn't know that. And I think that really, I think it's a testament to the community culture where they were just so inviting. They were like, oh, come talk to us. What do you care about? What can we do to help access youth? And what can we do to support you? And then I think the people there were just so incredibly supportive and loving and caring that I felt myself becoming more comfortable with them. I hadn't ever really talked about my identity sexually ever in a big public space before. I kind of steered clear of those spaces at USC. I steered clear of them in community organizations. But coming to Okaeri, and with people, like Eric said, like aunties, uncles, you see in the community who are allies and they're supporters. And I think seeing that level of just camaraderie really changed my life, where now I'm very involved with Okaeri, and having found that voice and support meant the world to me. And so for myself, I would just say that finding a community of people who care for you and look out for you, which Okaeri can be for everybody, was life-changing for me. And so the culture of it is really what kept me here and why I'm still so involved now. But I definitely, with Eric said, when you walk into that big banquet hall or the big hall in Janum, you're like, whoa, there are so many people here. And it's just a really kind of mind-boggling experience. And then going to learn all the skills and all the history at the workshops. And we'll still have those with our virtual programming, but it's really special.
I'm so excited for that. I just wanted to throw out, because Justin and Eric have given their Marcia stories, and I kind of want to get mine in there too. I mean, this really so special the way that she met you both. And like, I was just thinking about how I actually still, I don't think I've met Marcia yet in person, but I had been hearing her name my entire life because I guess she knew my parents through the adoption agency that I was adopted through. So yeah, I'd been hearing her name, and I don't know, with the recent social unrest and with the recent quarantine, I just donated to some organizations, and I knew about the PFLAG that she organizes in San Gabriel Valley because my mom just like took to that organization like fish and water. And so anyway, so Marcia reached out to me and pulled me into this and offered to let me start working with Okaeri. So yeah, Marcia, I think, has in so many ways touched a lot of people's lives, and I haven't even met her yet. So yeah.
I know, I'm hearing about Marcia. I would really like to meet her now.
Bring your Kleenex.
Bring my Kleenex. I bet.
And I mean, I think one thing special about Okaeri that really has had a ripple effect, where just from the past gatherings, they've had effects where people have had similar smaller scale gatherings in Seattle, in San Francisco. We're bringing folks from Nagoya in Japan, kind of our sister city program with Okaeri. And so really seeing that, it's been really great to see that our program here has had this wonderful effect around the world, especially around the US. And so hoping just to see that continue to grow and bring more people into the fold, this is the dream. So.
Yeah, that sounds amazing. So, so are you planning any virtual events where you can get all those different chapters kind of together? I don't know if how that would work with virtual, but maybe just a giant Zoom meeting or something.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's going to take a few different forms. We've been trying to see about what we can do. We have a wonderful programming committee led by Diana Ujie, who is working to really help make sure that we are staying active on Zoom and with virtual everything. So from the panel with Janum, with George Takei, Eric's wonderful intergenerational support groups. We have a program in Nisei Week. So if any of y'all are following Nisei Week in LA, we're going to have a video clip in there about social justice. So trying to do what we can, but if organizations want to partner with Okaeri and hear our stories and kind of help make sure that we can spread the word amongst ourselves, we would be happy to connect with other groups as well.
That's so great. Yeah, that's amazing.
Emily, I just want to kind of point out how kind of bizarre this forum, because we don't get to see who's listening to this call, you know, our audience. And so, but I just want to reach out to everybody and let everyone know, if you yourself are LGBTQ, or you know somebody in your family and you're going through an experience of coming out, or you just don't know how to process this and you can't talk to anybody, this is a wonderful opportunity for you to plug into a community and find a family or an ally or an aunt, or, you know, somebody who mirrors exactly where you're at, maybe a couple steps ahead of you, and you know, they'll be able to mentor you and walk you through the process. You know, one of the things about our community, the cultural value of saving face, it prevents us from actually being known to each other sometimes, you know, and it actually stands in the way of some healing that can happen, right? So I really want to encourage whoever might be listening, if you know somebody or you think you know somebody who might be going through this, you know, maybe you could very gently encourage them or share some information with them.
Yeah, I think that visibility is so important because I know from my personal experience that that when I was younger, I remember my mom asked me as a teenager, she thought like, oh, I think we were going through like a drive-through or something, and we just like had nowhere to go. We're just like waiting in line, and so she kind of turns to me and starts making small talk, and she's like, "So any boys you like at school or anything?" And I was like, "No, not really." And then she's like, "Okay, any girls you like?" And
Wow.
I think and the answer was no again, but at the same time, I think I also felt like I just kind of like shut down like even the possibility, because I think I just assumed that, oh, if I like guys in general, or attracted to guys in general, then that means I'm probably straight. And I just didn't really know anyone at the time who identified as LGBTQ, and so I'm kind of wondering, it's like, oh, maybe if I had met someone like earlier on, maybe I would have been able to understand it a little bit more, or like talk about it, or at least just hear more about it, and then maybe I would have figured it out before college, because I don't think I really really reflected on that within myself until I got to college. And because that was just kind of an unusual situation, I guess, to begin with. I went to a women's college in particular, and there's usually the stereotype about women's colleges where it's like we're either nuns or we're all gay. So that was kind of an interesting situation, and I was like, oh no, like obviously that's just a weird stereotype. But then when I went to college, I think just being within this environment where it's usually lots of women's colleges are very small populations, maybe like 1,000, maybe 2,000 people. So it's a pretty tight-knit community, and then also pretty progressive, because everyone's definitely thinking about like equal rights for women, and but that also applies to LGBTQ spaces and people of color. And so it's a very progressive environment, and I think people were a lot more open in talking about that, and that's where I was kind of like, oh, okay, yeah, maybe this applies to me as well. So I think that's why this is so great to have Okaeri and to have that visibility, and I hope that there are people out there who are maybe kind of like I was, like on that border, and maybe thinking like, oh, okay, yeah, maybe this is something I should like start looking into a little bit more and seeing how I feel about that.
Your mom sounds cool.
Yeah, she is. She's a wonderful lady. Yeah. But oh, sorry, did you have something to say?
I think I would just really echo what you said, Emily, about I think college can be a really big time for transformation, about learning others' stories, learning about yourself, learning about what you like, what you don't like, can be a really impactful time. And I think that what I wish I would have known when I was in high school, kind of unpacking myself, was that there's no one path to coming out or one set path to knowing who you are. It takes time, and whenever you're ready is when you're ready, and there's no reason to rush that. I think that I have friends that, urging, you should turn to this resource when they're trying to come out, because I knew maybe our other friends didn't know that. But realizing, reflecting back now, I think everybody's journey is different, and being understanding of that is really important. And I think back when I was like a 16-year-old in high school, I wish somebody would have told me that you can take your time, do whatever it takes to make sure that you're comfortable. And I think that's something that I wish I would have known. And I would tell anybody else who's wondering about themselves too.
Yeah, for sure. That's definitely a good message.
Also, in high school, we didn't have Zoom. You know, like, how great would it have been to go to Okaeri in high school through Zoom?
Guess what? When I was in high school, we didn't even have the internet.
That sounds amazing.
It really sucked because I was completely alone.
Yeah.
And it's wild how things have changed. Even just even what we've seen within the pandemic of everything going online all of a sudden. So like even just in general, Tadaima, it's really amazing. Like I never would have fathomed this before. But I think it's about time that we can start turning to some live chat questions. I don't know if there are any questions out there. Okay. Or we can just keep talking a little bit more. Let's see if I have any other questions for you all. I guess if we want to just kind of talk about like maybe what are those stigmas that or like misconceptions that LGBTQ people might be facing, and if there are any misconceptions that we can kind of clear up or like discuss right now for people who are out there listening.
I don't know how many people still believe this, but I think some people still believe that you can be turned gay, or that it's an identity that is acquired. Yeah. So I think that needs to be, talked about right away, and because I personally, I knew consciously, I probably already knew my whole life, but I knew consciously I was gay when I was 5 years old.
Yeah.
And it had nothing to do with sex. It was just noticing something different about me and how I saw the world and how differently I saw myself vis-a-vis my family system, right? So I knew that there was something about me that was different, and it became much clearer as I entered puberty, but it was definitely there when I was 5.
Yeah. I think that was one of those stereotypes that was kind of surrounding about going to women's college, was that they said that like, oh, everyone's either a nun or they're gay, and there's like nothing in between. And then if you go to that women's college, then you will turn gay, and it's like, no, that's really not true. That's not possible. Like maybe like in my case, it was just like, oh, it may help you realize something that was already there, but it doesn't mean that there's any sort of transformation. Yeah.
I think that one stigma is that I think that people feel that being gay or being LGBTQ becomes like your one pervasive identity. This is who you are if you come out. And I think that kind of combating that's something that I've been working with myself, knowing that I think I have so many other identities, very multifaceted, and that I can be Justin, and I can be a brother, and I can be a son, and I can be a Trojan. So I love USC and fight on. And all these things. And I think, but knowing that just like being bisexual does not make me who I am, and I can kind of choose for myself how I want to present. And I think that's been a big thing for myself, learning that you can be a part of multiple communities, and one trait does not define who you are, especially within the J community. I think leading as an advocate, as an activist, as a community organizer, I think that you can choose who you want to be for yourself, and I hope that other people around you allow people to have that security and accepting people for who they want to become and who they want to present as. And that's been something for me that's been really important. Balancing different identities about who I want to be in different spaces, but at the same time being comfortable in being myself. I think one small thing I want to project to, I think everywhere across the nation, is that making sure to also use pronouns. I think at USC it's a very big thing, talking about using your he, him, his, she, her, hers, they, them, their pronouns is very helpful. So when you're entering these spaces, if you understand what the importance of pronouns, we can talk more about that later on, but definitely I hope to see in the future that more community spaces begin by saying introductions, including pronouns, because they're really important in making sure people feel comfortable in spaces. So that's my hope for the Nikkei community moving forward.
Then Michael, I don't know if you have anything that you'd like to add.
Yeah, I do have a thought. I don't want to take this into too dark of a space, but I do think that we are still dealing with issues of a stigmatized image of Asian Americans in general, East Asians and Southeast Asians. I think especially with the way we're portrayed in popular media, I think that there are serious stereotypes with respect to gay or effeminate men, for example, in media. And I don't know, I've just been thinking about this a lot because in my field in music, there's a lot of really deep questioning of institutional norms and how we can change those. And I think that when I start to look around at the images of Japanese Americans on TV, well, first of all, or in radio or media, there really aren't any. And when they're rather pernicious. And so I feel like from this perspective, we have a very long way to go with that kind of representation, that kind of, or I should say visibility. I think the in-person visibility is maybe more impactful and more powerful and probably the thing to hold on to, and the great work Okaeri is actually doing. But to me, that is still can be really pervasive. It's just the way that we see ourselves projected in media is, I think, still really lagging.
Yeah, that's a great point. And I think it does seem like there was a lot of similarities where there's kind of a view that people who identify as LGBTQ are kind of predatory. Same thing with people of color, especially with men of color. Throughout history, that's always been kind of part of that stereotype, like that yellow peril, especially for Asian Americans. And so yeah, I can definitely see some similarities between within that intersection of those multiple identities.
I think that as having this dual culture, a lot of the stereotypes are actually exist within our own LGBT community. And, that's why it's really important to have being able to embrace all of yourself and to have support of your community, as Justin was saying, and also being able to choose how you present yourself. And, when I came out, I thought that I couldn't be Japanese anymore, so I left the community. And I thought I was going to be part of the Rainbow Tribe, right? And they would accept me and roll the red carpet, and it would be a big disco party. And it was anything but that in the 80s and even in the 90s. And I would say till today, there's a lot more visibility and acceptance of Asian men in the community. But when that doesn't work out, where do you go? What's your fallback? It should be your birth community. It should be your family. It should be your relatives, your brother and your sister, your uncles and nieces, nephews. It should be the people that you culturally identify with. And that was a really important lesson. It isn't that I'm not accepted in the gay community, but I was very shocked to experience being stereotyped and being discriminated against in the community, especially in the sexual politics of gay male culture. That was really intense, and I really had to work up into an identity that I really didn't want to be. I mean, to be super masculine and hyper aggressive and assertive, that those are not really things that came naturally to me, but I had to cultivate that in order to assimilate into that culture. And I think that we don't need to do that. If we had full support of our community and we can stay somewhat grounded in both and navigate both communities, that we don't have to take on these roles that the greater society says we have to,
Absolutely.
Yeah, I want to echo what you just said, Eric. That seems so important to me. That, it's something that I think maybe the three of us on this panel can speak to specifically about. And right, that sometimes toxicity can come from within the LGBTQ community, especially as cisgender men. And so I think, to me, this is an argument for why intersectional communities is so important, right? Because then we don't even have to exist within that stigma, right? We can go right to who we are and where we belong, as opposed to maybe having to feel like we have to fight to be accepted within an LGBTQ community, that we have to project ourselves a certain way, but that we can be our whole selves, right?
Absolutely. We did get a question from the live chat for Eric. It says, looking back, can you discuss how your experience might have been different had something like Okaeri been around when you were younger?
Oh. I mean, there's two ways of looking at this. If I had never left my community, and I could drag my parents to a support group, and gotten their support and acceptance, my life may be completely different. I mean, I wouldn't have gone to the Army. I might not have struck out on my own. I might have started my own business, a whole bunch of things. But I also might not have experienced such pain and isolation and fear and uncertainty, right? And for years not knowing who I was, and for 10 years not talking to my parents, and if somebody had been there to plant the seed and say, hey, you know what? I'm a parent of a gay man, Japanese American gay man, and I love you and I love him. And let me meet your parents. Let's have a conversation. That could have been transformative. It could have been life changing, right? But that said, I love the way my life has unfurled. But if Okaeri were there, I think that I think I was pretty close to suicidal when I was a youth. And I think that would have been really an interesting opportunity for, to end that isolation and not to feel so alone.
Absolutely. And I think, yeah, kind of talking about mental health, that's also a major issue within the LGBTQ community, because so many people like you have felt that they didn't have anywhere to go, or they were, or they were pushed out of their home by their family, or maybe they just didn't feel very welcome. And so that definitely arises within the LGBTQ community. And I think it's also a major issue within the Japanese American or the greater Asian American Pacific Islander community, where I think there's still a stigma that we also don't talk about mental health within that community, and that can be really harmful, because if we don't talk about it, then people can't get the help they need to address it. And it just seems kind of like another area where those areas just kind of come together, and it shows why something like Okaeri is so important, because then it can kind of focus specifically on those issues that a very specific kind of demographic is facing. But we do have another question from Marsha. Oh, Marsha Izumi. She says, thank you, Emily, Michael, Eric, and Justin. How can Okaeri attract younger leaders? What programs would attract younger Nikkei LGBTQ?
Our fearless leader is here with us in this chat. Thank you, Marsha, for joining us. It's good to see your comment. I'll take this one. I'll also turn to Michael and Eric as well for this one as well. I think the question really is unanswered, but I think we have a few ideas in mind. First off, we would love to hear from people who have ideas to let us know. Connect with us, email, social media, DM me, anything. Let us know what your ideas are. But for myself, as I think current college student, seeing that Okaeri is being intersectional in different issues. We released a statement in support of the Black Lives Matter movement, making sure that we are not acting in a silo, and that I think being a Nikkei LGBTQ community is very specific, which is wonderful, but also it's very specific. So making sure that we're still being partnered with other communities, supporting other groups like PFLAG and all of the other different human rights organizations, and really being an advocate on multiple levels is going to be, I think, what will take us to make sure that we have a more broad universal appeal, but also making sure that we're still keeping up with the times, making sure that our programs are relevant and engaging and educational, and that there are things that people care about. For myself, I said before, I love learning the history of what it means to be Japanese American and LGBTQ in terms of activism. I just never knew that there was such a rich history of people who were doing this work for decades and decades and decades. And so learning that for me was really impactful. And so, but I think hearing what different people care about would be important, but also knowing that we have a community amongst ourselves that I have a team who run our social media. Shout out to Takeshi and Caitlin, they're awesome. And they're some of my really good friends. And so I think just meeting other people who are also young and excited to do this work has been really impactful. So that's my kind of short and sweet answer. But Michael and Eric, I'd also be curious to know what you think we could do to attract more Nikkei LGBTQ youth.
Michael?
Sure. Well, how do I follow that? I really feel like one thing that Okaeri can continue to do, I still feel like somewhat of an outsider. I'm getting to know the organization, but I think that this moment we're living through right now, the singularity of what's happening in the world in the United States, I think calls for the Nikkei community to keep asking ourselves, how can we support Black lives and be behind the Black Lives Matter movement? Now, I've been sort of processing this a lot lately, and it's difficult to think about, how does my intersectional identity, how does that relate to this really important work that's going on, and how can I be part of it? And also, how can my understanding of my identity allow me to have a more empathic understanding of what's happening for other people? So I think that, like, if the question is framed as how do we attract younger Nikkei LGBTQ, I think that, like, young Nikkei LGBTQ people are probably thinking about these same things too, right? How is my identity enmeshed with the changes that I really want to see in the world? And so, I keep thinking about how a lot of these institutional changes, coming back to, like, my field, Justin's becoming a professional, is like, I'm sure you're thinking about all of these, like, systemic issues in our field and how we can change them from the inside out. I feel like a lot of these things are really important practice and important step building changes that for us to be able to then benefit as Nikkei community, I think we also need to put in work for others too, and to think about, like, how we can be collective, not just for Nikkei, but for all people of color, Indigenous, Black, brown, and all people. So I think programs that are continuing to address these more specific problems will help us in the general. So I'm curious, I'm sure some of these things are already ongoing, and I just might not be aware of them yet.
First of all, you two answered that question beautifully, and I think it's part of your real lived experience, because you're in the now, you're in the moment, you're younger folk, and so you have a little bit more of your finger on the pulse of where this can go. For me, I think that our community is structured in such a way that younger people are somewhat insulated, from a lot of things in life from their parents or their families, and so I think paradoxically getting older people to come into our community gives permission for younger people to come in, and also the most vulnerable people, the people that for young people who are still developing their identities, I think we need to have a vibrant and group of older people who give permission. Like it's really interesting to see grandparents at our events. It's like, because our assumption is, it'll kill them if we tell them we're gay, right? And they're there supporting with their rainbow flag, and they're amazing, right? So if grandma and grandpa can do it, little whoever can come out, and maybe, or volunteer, just be an ally, right? So I think so much of our activism in our community is based on family, right? So I think getting everyone on board. And also in our community, nobody wants to be the first, and no one wants to be the only to do anything, right? So once that door is open, I think we'll have a lot of people coming into our community, our organization.
And also, I want to add, and this is what I've mentioned before, but I think that we will have to be, and we are going to be flexible with what does it mean to be Nikkei. We call it the Nikkei LGBTQ community. Nikkei isn't only Gosei, Yonsei, Sansei, Nisei, Japanese Americans. Nikkei is, I think, a more all-encompassing term that's being changed in the recent years. But what does it mean to be Nikkei? Nikkei can be individuals who identify with the Japanese American values, people who identify with the culture, and knowing that Okaeri isn't only for ethnically Japanese Americans. It's anybody who identifies as Nikkei and who cares about, I think, fostering empathy and understanding and love for the LGBTQ space. And so understanding that we can't be exclusionary, and we are not. And I think making sure that people are aware that Okaeri is for everybody. And that's part of what our mission is. So I want to add that tidbit in as well.
That's great. Thank you. I'm going to go back to an earlier question real quick, just to adjust it, by Thomas Kurihara. How does the pansexual orientation relate to LGBT universe? So pansexual, it's a little bit different from bisexual in that it doesn't really look so much at the gender binary. So I can be attracted to both men and women. But I can also be attracted to people who do not identify as either men or women. So they might fall into a non-binary gender identity. And so it's just kind of I feel like I like to describe it as the capacity to love anyone. So, yeah. So sometimes people like to sometimes because bisexual is a more well-known identity. Sometimes I'll explain to people that I'm bisexual rather than saying pansexual. But some people are also a little bit more particular about those differences. So it's a little bit different for everyone. And then there's another question by Ken Mochizuki. Does coming out become easier with each succeeding generation? Do you know of Sansei coming out to Nisei parents, Nisei to Issei parents, and how difficult was it in each case? Ooh, that's a good question. Yeah, so I'm like Eric, I'm fourth generation myself, and so I'm not really familiar. I don't know how it was like for other people, but I don't know if you've all heard stories from others within Okaeri or in the larger community. Maybe not.
I really don't know, but I mean, I think it's an interesting question, and I feel like, at least from the perspective of what Okaeri does, that the answer should always be that for some people it could be extremely difficult, and people will face challenges, and just to always keep that in mind. You know, I assume that things generally get easier, and you know, we've already talked about some of the resources that weren't available just a few years ago, even. But I think the assumption that we're trying to reach the people who for whom it is difficult and who do have limitations and resources, that's, you know, important always.
I agree. I think there are so many factors that come into play to answer this question, because each family is unique and different, right? And each situation is different. Like one major contributing factor that might be a barrier is if a family is extremely religious and has some kind of bias, you know, about homosexuality or LGBTQ identity. Or a political point of view that is not supportive, right? But I think we see families in the entire spectrum of you know, thought and ideology, and you know, all that's required is that you love each other, you love your LGBTQ person, you know, in your family, and you're willing to learn, you know, and listen to each other. So even the most difficult situation, we've seen completely transform. We have mothers that come. I used to participate in a PFLAG group that was specifically, it's a support group for LGBTQ parents and loved ones of LGBTQ members. And you know, in a year's time, we'll have a parent that comes and just melts in the chair, sobbing because they don't understand why their child is the way they are, and they're blaming themselves for, you know, their child being LGBTQ, and they feel that they failed as a parent and all these things, and they're angry and confused. And a year later, they're marching in the parade, you know, the LGBTQ Pride Parade, right? And supported by other parents and other people in the community. And it's a really amazing journey if you're willing to, you know, take the first step.
Something Eric said really sparked another idea for me too, like with this idea that coming out is not a one-way street. And the sort of the value, you know, we've been talking about the value of having an intergenerational community. I mean, you know, you could look at it from the perspective of what maybe would hold a parent back from getting to know their child in a really open way. And of course, it's really important. But I also think that those kinds of setbacks and those kinds of difficulties work in reverse as well. If you are closed off as a parent, perhaps, I say this without value judgment, but if that's the case, then it prevents you as a child from getting to know your parent. And I think that this, when I think about my Japanese American identity, I feel like this is a really, really important part of it, which is how much do you know about your parents and their history, and how much they told you and how much they shared with you. And so I feel like the act of coming together to celebrate one person's identity is really an ability for a whole family to celebrate their whole identity. So, you know, this question about does it get easier, I think, I don't know how I got into that territory, but what Eric was saying was, you know, really inspired that thought. So
yeah, thank you for sharing. There's also a kind of a follow-up question, I guess, to Ken's question by Thomas Kurihara, which is, so he's asking, is difficulty magnified by the social environment in which the family lives?
I think my reaction is yes. I think that the family that you're in, the values they come up with, like Eric was saying, if they're religious or not, will really impact how comfortable you are with coming out. I think that's also why it's so important to have spaces like Okaeri, like PFLAG, where people can find community if you can't find it in your immediate surroundings, to still find those who support you and welcome you and want to talk to you about what you're going through. And so yes, I think to answer the question shortly, it is dependent upon the social environment you're in, but also I think underscores why we have to have spaces to create compassionate spaces like Okaeri for dialogue around that.
And then there's another question by Daniel Tomita. In your experiences, what are some of the unique challenges that we face growing up LGBTQ in the Nikkei community?
I think one thing that, sorry to answer again, to kind of I've been unpacking recently, the idea of being the perpetual foreigner, which is a very, I think, more pervasive Asian American experience, where you always feel like you're different than your other peers, primarily Caucasian peers. And so I think always feeling like you're different, to add one more layer onto that being LGBTQ plus, you're like, I don't want to be even more different than I already am. And so I think that coupled with the JA culture, trying to not be the odd one out, trying to, I think, really be able to not only fit the mold, but really be able to support the community and not stick out has been something that I've experienced. But at the same time, I will say that I think having the rich history of the Japanese Americans during the incarceration experience and having the big movement in the 80s for redress and reparations has been a way for myself to see that my family members have been supportive of social justice and trying to be on the right side of history. And so on the flip side, a benefit of being Japanese American, I think, is knowing that our community has had overcome hardships in the past and have had the capacity to be vocal about those issues. So I think it's really both sides. There's good and bad to it, but those are my thoughts. But I'm also curious to know, Emily, what you think, and Michael and Eric as well.
Oh my goodness. If anyone wants to go before me, I can gather my thoughts, but otherwise I can try to come up with something.
well, yeah, I think what Justin said was right on. That stereotype is not great. And I don't know, it makes me think about, again, coming back to visibility, and not to pull this into another structural critique, but I mean, I think about actually the Bowen Yang, who recently got hired on SNL, is one of the first openly gay Asian American comedians, which is awesome. He's so funny. I've heard him talk on some podcasts about just how Asian American identity is not given a whole lot of space in popular culture, even though it's like, it's there, it's formulated, it's made, it's dynamic, and it exists. It's just not made visible by, like, you know, money. And so I feel like this stereotype is constantly reified when we don't really see ourselves existing outside of real life, like, you know, on TV and so forth. So I'm curious how we can hold other people accountable for unwittingly making us outsiders. Not to put too fine a point on it, but
That's great. I was just thinking, as far as some unique, I guess, experiences or challenges that LGBTQ people face within the Nikkei community. I think, speaking as like an Asian American woman, it's kind of interesting how, because how the perceptions of me are. So I know that I don't really seem obviously LGBTQ. I even kind of mentioned it in passing to a friend, and then they had to do a double take and then double check with me because they thought they had heard wrong. But I think there's also, I think with Asian American women specifically, there's a major fetishization of them. And so I think it's just kind of assumed that we're just openly available for straight men, especially like straight white men, to engage like in heterosexual relationships. And it's like, well, I think that kind of erases any room for having those LGBTQ identities as Asian women.
Thank you for sharing that.
I mean, for me, I think it's, you know, the cultural norm or narrative of the father and the honor and the saving face and all that stuff. And I mean, I think that's something that is such a strength in our community, you know, and I think it inspires a lot of people to become their best and to be their best, right? But you can't help but feel as a gay kid or as an LGBTQ kid that you failed your parents somehow, right? And the expectations of, if not your family, the community, right? So, those were my young thoughts, you know, growing up, because somebody said earlier, you know, you can come out to your family, but they won't say anything. They won't ask you questions about your life or ask you if you're dating somebody or openly acknowledge your partner, right? And this is called a null environment. And in our culture, we get null environments a lot. Like people don't have anything nice to say, so they say nothing at all, right? Or it's shameful. It somehow incite some kind of shame in them, so they decide not to acknowledge it completely, right? And so I think those moments in the community were kind of messages, were subliminal messages were sent to, you know, be quiet or don't make waves or don't be different, and taken to the extreme, we would rather that you not be here because you're making us uncomfortable, right? And I know things have changed a lot, but for some people it hasn't changed at all, right? So
yeah, I think that's a really great point about expectations. I think especially in the Japanese American community, there are a lot of expectations, whether it's socially or academically. It's just you have a lot of pressures that you're dealing with.
mm-hmm.
So another question we have from the chat is from, I think, Eli. My Nisei mom was amazing. She knew before I did, I'm pretty sure. When I was maybe 12, I remember her at a big dinner shouting across the table at an in-law who made a gay joke.
Mm.
Wow, that's a really cool mom. It's nice to hear.
I'll share a kind of quick funny story, kind of maybe a closing thought was that I remember when I was in high school, we were going to Chick-fil-A, and at the time Chick-fil-A was embroiled in a big scandal because they were like anti-gay for some of their funding sources. So that was kind of the image on them. And I remember I hadn't come out to my mom yet at all at that point, but she said, oh, like Chick-fil-A hates the gays, therefore we hate Chick-fil-A. And I was like, oh, and I think that was a big thing for me. Oh, she supports like the LGBTQ plus community, but I think definitely mothers know best and their intuition is always really great. And that, at least in my experience as well, my mom's always been so supportive, even in ways that she would kind of be subliminally sending me messages of support. And so, yeah, but I would definitely echo, I think Eli, my mom's great too, and I understand that very closely.
Yeah, I'm thinking that my mom probably knew as well. Maybe she wasn't sure, but she has some sort of intuition. Okay, well, yeah, I think we'll wrap up now because it sounds like that's the last of the live chat comments and questions. But again, I just wanted to thank you all for coming and joining us on this panel today. And it's been a really lovely conversation that we got to have through this. And I'll definitely have to check out Okaeri so I can learn more. I'd definitely like to see more of JAs who identify as LGBTQ because this is really, really cool to me.
I'm really happy that you were part of you were able to facilitate this because your voice was really needed in this conversation. Thank you, Emily.
Yeah, thank you so much. Thanks for having us.
Yeah, thank you so much. And make sure to stay connected with us again. social media, we're everywhere. So, but thank you so much, Emily, and thank you to Tadaima for having us.
Absolutely. Yeah, and if we can just pull up the Okaeri social media again, so people can see where to get connected. So this is for Instagram and Facebook. And so if you out there in the audience are interested in joining or learning more, definitely check out these websites or social media handles. You can learn more, and because I definitely will be, I know. But yeah, so thank you so much, and for sharing your stories, and for just being so open to accepting all these questions from the live chat. It's been a really wonderful panel. So thank you so much.
Thank you, Tadaima.